No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today I'm bringing you a very rare, very exclusive, very important peek into the mind of someone who's been formative in the creation of hardcore music over the years. Freddy Madball in the building.
Yeah.
How you feeling, man?
Good, man. I'm good.
Pull the mic up a little bit if you don't want to have to
no
like
problem.
crane your neck. Yeah. You have full freedom with the arm
My
there.
neck's
Yeah.
already like destroyed from like banging my head and like.
That's how it goes, huh?
So I'm. That's good.
Is that super
this all right?
consistent? Yeah, you look good.
Yeah.
Is that really consistent with everybody that your body just takes so much wear and tear from performing?
Dude. Yeah.
I heard
And the
some
older
horror
you get,
stories.
the more you feel.
Yeah. How old are you at this point?
I'm 46. I'll be 47 next month. Like, not long.
Not that old though, all things considered.
I don't think so.
I think when you start
hope
to hit
not.
like mid 50s.
That's when you're considered old.
Yeah, I mean, like, I started doing this in large part because I was influenced by Joe Rogan. And I'll be honest with you, like, he's kind of like mid 50s now, and he definitely seems old as fuck to me now.
Yeah.
Which he didn't really seem like that old to me 10 years ago when I started.
He's in pretty good shape though, man. Right? He's
That growth hormone.
Yeah, he's in good shape.
Yeah, no, he
From what
definitely-
I can see, I mean, I don't know him, but
Yeah, and I mean, if somebody like him or somebody like you or me, you know, we have like the best chance of staying young in the sense that we don't have to wake up and do some shitty job necessarily, and that you get a lot of freedom to, you know, pursue your interests and stuff like that, which I think keeps you young.
yeah, I agree, man. I think there's something to that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, entertainment, music, like doing stuff you love.
Right.
Yeah,
I could imagine that if I had to spend the next 10 years of my life, I don't know, delivering newspapers,
yeah, you might
it would take a toll.
get beat up.
Yeah.
Like in a different way.
Just mentally, like I wouldn't expect my brain to be like functioning the same way. In the same way that if I went and did solitary confinement for 10 years, I know I would be fucked.
Oh yeah, that'd be rough.
Now, I'm not saying that delivering newspapers is that bad, but it's like, it's almost as meaningless. You know, like in comparison to the feeling of going out and rocking a fucking packed crowd or putting out a podcast and you know, it's in terms of like the value you get from the experience,
Yeah,
got to be a big divide.
at least delivering newspapers, you're free.
This is true.
Got your freedom.
Oh yeah, you compare it to prison? Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know.
You can make anything in life seem pretty good when you compare it to prison.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Facts.
You're on vacation when you're fighting with your girl. It's like the worst time you ever had in your whole life.
Yeah.
If you think about prison in comparison.
My life's not so bad.
Yeah, you'd be all right. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and what it was like for you as a kid.
Let's see. Excuse me. I was born in Passaic, New Jersey. My mother's from Havana, Cuba, and my dad's from Barranquilla, Colombia. And
One second. What's that beeping? Okay. This sounds crazy. I just heard the beep like. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, keep going.
But yeah, my story is basically, I was born in, contrary to what some people might think, I'm not a native New Yorker. I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, and to immigrant parents. My mom's from Cuba, my dad's from Colombia.
Right.
First generation. And then my family relocated to Florida, South Florida.
Okay. At what age?
I was probably like 4 going on 5, 4 around there.
Okay.
That age. So I didn't live in Jersey much. And then we went to, South Florida, Miramar. Shout out to Miramar, close to Miami, Broward-Dade County border. Just all that area.
Right.
And then, but, you know, I always had connections to up north, you know, New Jersey. I always had family in the New Jersey area. My brother, my oldest brother, Roger, who got me into this whole scene, he stayed back and moved into the city.
Right.
Alphabet City, Lower East Side area.
Right.
And so that was always my connection to New York.
So he'd be kind of telling you what was going on with like the Lower East Side scene and hardcore music, hip hop, that kind of stuff, I'm guessing?
Well, he wasn't a hip hop guy. I'm the hip hop guy in the family. He's from that generation of more like they come from punk.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But the era where like punk is still like the enemy of hip hop, kind of like they're sort of warring sides.
Yeah. But
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, he's open minded about music, so he liked a little bit of everything. But he wasn't. I wouldn't put the hip hop tag on them. Like that was me. I've been a hip hop head since I was like as long as I could remember.
Right.
Like I grew up in that generation of just like late 80s, well, not even late, all 80s hip hop and especially 90s hip hop. Like that was my era. Like we were running wild in the streets during the 90s, so we were living that whole era of hip hop. Like
right. It was like,
but,
it's funny when you think about that time when it was still very contentious to be into hip hop and, you know, hardcore or aggressive music at the same time.
Yep.
But I've done a lot of interviews with a lot of different people who basically were taking a big risk by doing that at a certain point in their career of kind of mixing the two, and that, you know, they just reaped a lot of spoils from it because there were not that many people that were having the balls to mix those two. You know, you saw Limp Bizkit basically got to take the world by storm by just sort of doing
they went for it.
Yeah, I mean, they mixed the two together and put a lot of money behind it and it fucking went crazy.
Yep. And say what you want about it, but it popped off.
Yeah.
They had some big hits.
Maybe even like so big that they kind of ruined it for everybody else.
Yeah, possibly, possibly,
Yeah,
possibly. But no, they did their thing, man. You know,
Right.
I actually know Fred. He's a good dude, man. We went on a Limp Bizkit tour in the UK like a few years back.
Right.
He put us on, so that was a cool thing that he, you know, showed respect to like our scene and us. You know?
How was that playing to their audience, or like what percentage of it did you feel like was your audience?
Very small percentage. I would say, I couldn't even put a number on it. But I mean, I did see heads out there. Like I saw some heads that like, they knew who we were. But like majority, nah. Majority was like that, you know, because they were mainstream. You know, they were on some other, you know, they were mainstream band and had MTV hits and all that. So, you know, they're drawing in that crowd.
You don't need to have any awareness of underground music or hardcore at all to be super familiar with Limp Bizkit, which basically like opens up their possible crowd to the normiest of normies.
Yep, exactly. So, and that's, you know, they had everything from like, you know, grimier people to like a bunch of squares. They had a big demographic of people. But one thing I will say is they were very open-minded towards us. And that was cool.
I love
That was cool.
concert demographics. Like I love looking out into the crowd and just being able to get a vibe for who this audience is. And you have to kind of stereotype because obviously no matter what, it's going to be mixed demographically. But like, you know, I remember I interviewed this rapper JPEG Mafia, who's sort of like an underground, like hipster type rapper for lack of a better term. And he was playing at like Pitchfork Festival. And I'm just looking out at the crowd. And it's just like all of the sort of like white elitist looking like music critic nerd kids. And I'm kind of just like, dude, I have never been to a show where that was the crowd. Like I've never been around this exact demographic. I'm pretty sure.
Right.
You know, whereas like then I went to a reunion show with like Snoop and The Game and everybody, like one of these old school 90s West Coast rap tours.
Nice. Sounds fun.
Oh, it was great. And I'm looking out at the crowd and there's so many like normal dads, 40 years old, holding a beer, standing there, rocking out the Snoop Dogg, just having a good time. And I'm like, this is like the most passive aggressive fucking normie grown ass rap fan who listens to the radio crowd I've ever been around. Like I actually really love witnessing the different crowds that get brought in, you know?
It's entertaining, man. People watching, it's fun.
But for you, okay, you're so deep into your career, and I always say that like if you want to be a rapper or whatever, you're gonna have to get past this era in your career where you're performing and basically getting no response from the crowd, and then, you know, best case scenario, you get really popular and all of a sudden you're performing to a crowd that knows every single word, and then you can kind of like afford to not be the best front man in the world because the audience is kind of doing it for you. But what is it like for you to be this late into your career and still go on tour and perform in front of audiences that realistically don't know what the fuck you're doing?
It's you know, like I'll use that Limp Bizkit as an example. It's actually was refreshing because, you know, it sort of gives you like you're trying to, you know, we've been around forever, but these people don't know us. So like it gives us that energy to like kind of like, let me show you what we're about as a band, as a culture, the whole thing. You know, I'm trying to squeeze in all that into like a 45-minute set. You know, I'm trying to like represent us, represent the movement, the scene, you know, everything I came from, everything we're trying to do. It was like, you know, it's fun, man. It was cool. I almost prefer that nowadays sometimes, like to be challenged in that way, to play to like newer crowds.
But what about like
even if sometimes it doesn't pan out,
right?
but sometimes a lot of
But compare that emotionally to like you play a show in New York, packed fucking venue, the literally like 80% of the crowd knows all the words to your songs and they're in your face and they won't get off stage. Like what's that feel like emotionally?
that's the best.
Yeah.
And New York and other cities too around the world, and a lot of cities in Europe, because Europe's really hardcore, really, really potent in Europe.
They
know
care.
what I'm saying? Yeah, they care, man. They care a lot about every aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like playing your own city or playing just a show that has that vibe where it's just like explosive right when you go on. Yeah, nothing beats that. But
as a person who deals mostly with rap now, I always feel like that's the thing that rap fans don't get is like how intense a live performance can be, because I've been to hardcore shows where it's like a fucking war breaking out as it starts and it's just like the coolest thing in the world, even if you've never heard this band before.
Yeah, no, it's unique in that way. I think nowadays, like, I guess moshing and slamming, like that's starting to like be accessible to the mainstream for whatever reason through whoever, it's been happening for some years now, with like Lollapalooza, like all these different, you start seeing that, but people, that's from our world.
Yeah.
Like that stuff is from our world, I mean, I didn't invent moshing, but like that aggressive, like just, way of dancing and way of expressing yourself, like that comes from us.
Right.
Not us Madball, but hardcore. And it's crazy to see that in the mainstream sometimes now. And I'm like, these people don't even know where that came from.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're like stage diving to like some pop band. You know what I mean? It's like so
rappers
weird.
And shit, they got crazy stage diving going sometimes
hip-hop.
they don't, the fans just go for it. Although I will say that I've seen certain artists play at like festivals or at festivals in different parts of the country where some of the crowds have a lot of moshing and some have almost none.
Right.
And it feels like it's almost like a cultural thing. Or I remember one time we did a show that was Blueface, who's a rapper from out here, and fuck, I forget who the other rapper was, but it was a very mixed crowd. So you kind of have like 35-year-old grown ass black women with their hair done in the same crowd as people who are moshing.
Oh boy.
And it's like it makes like these women are like terrified, like have no reference point for why this is happening anywhere near
What
them.
is this?
Yes, and it was crazy to see that culture shock.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's that. I mean, that's the special, like you were saying before, man. That's the special thing I feel like about our scene is just that kind of that transfer of energy, like when the music hits and like it's just like an explosion, like you said, like a fight almost, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I hate when it turns that way, when it goes to the, when it gets stupid and it turns into an actual fight. But when it's just like that controlled chaos or whatever you want to call it, like it's there's nothing like it really, man. You can't, and I love all music, but you can't really duplicate that in any other genre or culture or scene,
I mean, there's never going to be anything more intense than like life or death. And at hardcore shows, it basically feels like that. Like if you are not on point, then something very bad could happen to you here.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Definitely. So, okay, your brother is keeping you up to date while you're in Florida on what's going on in Jersey and New York?
Yeah, well, basically, he just stayed behind. He had friends, he had girlfriend. He didn't want to go to Florida, so he stayed there. And then he eventually discovered this scene in New York, because he started getting into punk, and then when he got into punk, he discovered there was something even more extreme than punk, and it was the New York hardcore scene. You know, and this is at the very early stages of the scene. We're talking early 80s. We're talking 80, 81, 82, like that.
Right.
I'm a baby, but I'm in Florida with my family, and at some point, I go to visit my family in New Jersey, and when I go to visit my aunt and my cousins, and I did this frequently for years, I always, stayed connected with it's my father's side of the family, and I was close with them, so I would spend summers in New Jersey, stuff like that, and my brother would scoop me up and bring me over to the LES, and that's when I was introduced to the whole scene.
Right.
A club called A7 that had like some of the original hardcore shows in New York, Great Gildersleeves, CBs, of course.
Right.
And I was a kid. I mean, I'm talking 7, 8 years old. And my aunt obviously didn't know, she saw my brother and was like telling my mom, like, is it okay if he goes with him? Like, are you sure?
Because the Lower East Side, even right now, I mean, it is a lit area, like a lot of energy, a lot of people around, a lot of cool stores. There's a lot of stuff to do. And it feels like that area of New York has kind of avoided some of the anti-fun gentrification that has happened like other parts of the city. Like it's that's still a part of the city where there'll be like a street blocked off so a bunch of kids can skateboard in the street, or at least like in certain parts here and there. It's like it's got a good vibe around there, but I'm assuming it was a lot more dangerous at that time.
Yes, a lot more dangerous. I mean, we're talking, again, early 80s. I would have been 7, 8 years old. We're talking 82, 83. And, it was a different place than what you see now. There was a lot of drugs. I mean, there's still a lot of drugs there. It's crazy how that's kind of made a comeback. Like, it's still, like, I see people nodding out again. Like, it's like come full circle, which is unfortunate. But
there's a little less policing now. It feels like you can get away with drinking on the streets. You can smoke weed on the streets.
Kind of going back to, that kind of wild place.
And when I was out there on a BMX trip recently and I seen one of the homies riding around his bike with a bottle of wine, like that's all good. And I'm like, at some point, like somebody's going to do something about this.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's how it always gets, right? It gets crazy and then somebody's got to come and clean up shop.
There'll be some mayor that gets elected to be tough on crime at some point, right?
Exactly. But back then, it was wild. It was just wild and lawless. And from I'm looking at this, obviously, and my memories are it's a little vague because it's
40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I remember, man. I remember like the griminess, the grittiness of it. I remember seeing, Tompkins Square Park was like junkie haven. It was wild. And then my brother was like living in a squat. A lot of people were living in like squats or like these, they would have one apartment with like 30 people in it. Like it was wild. I mean, they were street kids, maybe not in the sense of like everyone was getting into like street stuff, but
they were literally out on the streets day to day.
Yeah, day to day, drinking 40s on the street, hanging out, waiting for a show to, happen at 2 in the morning at A7, because the shows didn't start till 1 or 2 in the morning. So they were like, it was a street culture, even if someone came from the suburbs, doesn't matter. It was like, it was happening, like it was born right there in those, like in Alphabet City, in those streets, like LES. So yeah, I'm fortunate that I got to witness those early stages, and that was my start. That was my start into my, the journey that I've been on with this.
And what was your attraction to hardcore at that time? Like, what do you think that filled in you? Did you have that anger inside of you where this just sounded right to you? Because hardcore sounds like noise to a large percentage of the world, and then some percentage of it just sounds like the best shit they ever heard, right?
Sounded beautiful to me. I think I was just born like a very rebellious kid, and like, I don't know, had that thing where it was just like, and it was also a little bit of like my upbringing. My household wasn't like your normal household. It was a little wild style. A lot of drama. And so between that and, I had that angst in me. Yeah, I mean, that music really spoke to me. And of course, it was my brother. So anything like your older siblings do, you think is cool. When you're a kid, you're like, oh, he's in a band. Oh, that's cool. You don't. So I thought that was cool. I mean, everyone was tatted up. Back then, tattoos weren't fashionable, like they were like people would walk across the street.
It's an actual like sign that you're in a bad part of your life.
You're either a criminal, there's only like a few things you could be if you had tattoos. And then the hardcore kids in New York were getting tatted like crazy. They were getting, I remember Frenchie the Skin, he had like made in Canada on his head, on his forehead, before. Face tattoos and
made
forehead.
In Canada?
Yeah, because he was from Canada. They called him Frenchie.
I would hope so. If he's not from Canada, that's insanely misleading.
Yeah, he was like right on his forehead, man. Wow. Hard. And all those guys were wild, man. They were wilding out. They were like, so and the point being is that I loved it.
When's the last time you watched
everything about it?
When's the last time you watched Kids,
Kids, wow.
the movie?
I haven't seen that since years.
then,
I know
like-
those kids. I know a lot of them.
Right.
I know Harold. I knew all of them. Pete Beasy.
I just, when I was maybe 14, I saw that movie and was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, New York seems like the coolest fucking place in the world. I'm watching them take a piss on the side of the building out in the open, and even that seems crazy as fuck to me for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
And just everything about, like, the drugs and the girls and the craziness, it just seems so fucking cool. And I always talk about, like, BMX bike riding as basically why I moved to New York, but I think in reality, Kids probably played a role too. Like, I wanted that kind of urban dirt bag, like, you got nothing, you're sitting in the park just trying to scrape something together. Like, that lifestyle just really appealed to me at that time, having grown up in the suburbs.
Oh yeah. When were you in New York?
I moved to New York 2003 and stayed there 2010, and I lived in Astoria and Bushwick.
Oh, nice, yeah. Same thing, man. For some reason, I was attracted to all that. I mean, not from a BMX standpoint, but like music and like that whole vibe. The griminess of it, I don't know. I was a kid, but I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't like, get me out of here, send me home, like, get me back to my aunt's house, or like, no. I was like, I want to stay here. Like, my brother had to like force me to go back to my aunt's house. Like,
but you being that young, what were you being exposed to? Are you like getting into drugs and girls like too early? Or?
Nah, way too early for that. And I mean, the people around me, they were all young. You got to remember, like, if I'm 7, 8. They're only like 17, 18.
Okay, yeah.
19, except for like my brother Vinny, who, Vinny's the guy who started the band Agnostic Front that my brother ended up joining, but Vinny was like the oldest guy on the scene. He's 20 years older than me. So if I would have been 7, he'd have been 27. So he was already like a grown man, but he was like one of the few.
Right.
Everyone else was teens, like late teens.
Right.
And so I was basically hanging out with kids too.
Right.
They're not like responsible grown people,
Right.
But they did look after me, and they didn't let me get into like, they weren't letting me take sips of, I was too little.
Right.
They weren't letting me drink out of the 40 or try something weird, and my brother would never do that.
But are you seeing people doing heroin and crack and all this shit right in front of your face? Like, even people like not much older than you?
I would walk by it.
Yeah.
You'd walk through the park and boom, everywhere you look, junkies hitting it.
Right.
That was the environment. That I didn't love. I don't really like seeing that. But everything else, the street, the shows, the vibe, the camaraderie with the people there, like,
right.
It spoke to me, And again, I was probably looking for an escape, because whatever, for various reasons. So, yeah, I immediately fell in love with New York hardcore.
Madball was the first band you were a part of, and how did this take place?
Yeah, well, Madball was created in like '88.
Okay.
And it just stemmed from me hanging out with my brother's band Agnostic Front all the time, and I would go on tour with them. I'd do weekends with them. Whenever I was able to get away, from school, whatever it was, I'd go hang with them, and I started singing a song with Agnostic Front, "It's My Life," and then the first time I sang was actually on that trip when I was like 7, and I was mouthing the words, and they saw me, and Vinny spotted me and my brother, and they were like, "Give the kid the mic. He knows the words, like." And I sang, and I was terrified, but I did it.
Right.
And so it became a thing. Anytime I was hanging with them, give the kid the mic, let him sing a song.
So you had like the craziest internship, basically, of just being exposed to all this shit from such a young age, that you were able to soak up so much game at such a young age, and you actually had the wits about you to actually do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give myself that credit because I was a kid, but like I got to give my brother a lot of credit because he was the one that was like the mastermind behind like, okay, let's do a release with this kid, like
right.
He's with us all the time singing. People seem to like it. Let's do something about it, And then by that point, Vinny had already nicknamed me Madball, and so like they took that and they were like, "We're gonna give you some old AF songs, and we're gonna make this this thing for you, and and we're gonna call it Ball of Destruction."
Right. So they gave you a couple of older songs.
Oh yeah, all that.
I didn't even know. I've never heard of a band doing that, like gifting a song to a different band.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's family.
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
tight.
And some of it was unused, and some of it was stuff that they would still do in their set, but they were like, let's do these songs as Madball.
Right.
You know? And it was Ball of Destruction, that first release, which actually ended up coming out in 89. We recorded it in 88, but, you know, when I was 12 or something when I recorded it, it was like I was a little kid.
Right.
Don Fury studio.
And were you convinced it was going to be a big deal? Because from your perspective, Agnostic Front, are they a popular local band, or in your mind, are they gigantic already at this point?
I always had, you know, I always knew that hardcore was not, you know,
Right.
like, I've always, it's underground, you know what I'm saying? Till this day, you know? I mean, I know what they mean to the scene and what they mean to heavy music, or what some of our bands mean to that world, but like, yeah, I never thought like, oh, there's big, you know, like I understood what underground music was. I would always try to explain it to people, like, you know, like, this is this kind of music. Is it metal? Is it this? Is it, you know, like I've been doing that my whole life, like trying to explain to people like what hardcore is.
And you know, there's a funny thing about what you just said right there, which is that when you're young and you're into something, I think generally speaking, you don't think about how popular it is or how big it is, because when I was growing up getting into bike riding, I could have easily gotten into skateboarding, which was clearly much bigger, but I don't think that ever even crossed my mind that one was bigger than the other. And same thing with like, I'm into hardcore. Yeah, I don't think it ever crossed my mind that like, dude, if you were into like the Offspring, that, you know, you would be,
You could pop off.
Yeah, like you'd probably be more popular or some shit like that. That never occurred to me, which is probably a good thing, because like as an adult, it's very obvious to you, and maybe this is just the world we live in where we have so much more information, but it's very obvious to you like what sports are more popular than other sports, what bands are more popular than other bands. But as a kid, I had none of that instinct at all.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah.
I didn't care about that.
Right.
Like that wasn't my. If I liked it, I liked it. You
And
know?
I could go to a show with 500 people in the room, and it would seem like the greatest thing in the world. And I never would have thought to myself, well, Rolling Stones played to 20,000 people.
Never.
Yeah.
That would never have crossed my mind.
Right.
And obviously, you know, first time I ever went to any type of performance or show was a hardcore show. So that was my introduction anyway. You know, what, 40, 50, 100, 200 people, you know? So I never like, yeah, I mean, I didn't go to like a big rock show or big whatever kind of show until like later in life. You know, my experience with going to a show was hardcore stuff for a long time.
I saw Billy Joel play Madison Square Garden the other day.
Just the other day?
A couple months ago.
Wow. How was
Crazy.
that? Yeah? Oh.
I mean, just amazing. Like how many musicians they have on stage, how much they
yeah.
put into it. Looking out into the crowd, I was talking about normie crowds for that Snoop Dogg concert. No, this is a normie crowd. 60-year-old people who probably trade stocks for a living, and they're dancing and having a good time. They're looking into their wife's eyes, singing the songs to them. I'm standing there like, realistically, not the world's biggest Billy Joel fan. I just popped in.
Neither am I.
I like it. Like I like a lot of the songs, but I don't know every fucking word. It doesn't mean something to me like that. And I'm just seeing these old people have like serious emotional connections to these songs. It was pretty beautiful.
I agree, man. I was just gonna say that. I was like, you know what? That's what's important.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who the demographic is, who it is. I mean, like, if you're smiling and you're into it, like, you're having a good time, like, that's what it's about.
Right.
With any kind of music, you know, just different expressions of it.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
nice
I was
to
never
be
a
the
big Billy Joel guy.
It's nice to be the person having the emotional experience watching this band play, and it's if you can think outside of yourself, you could also just like witness somebody else having the same reaction and be able to appreciate it on their behalf. You know,
Facts.
definitely.
Yeah,
So okay, when does the Madball thing start catching on, and how does this proceed?
So fast forward to like we dropped Ball of Destruction. My brother presents it to his A&R. They were on In Effect. I don't know if you remember that record label. It was
Vaguely, yeah.
it was like under like, I think it was a part of Relativity.
Okay.
It was like it was like a imprint of Relativity, and there was like Combat Core, which was like metal, and then there was like In Effect, which put out like Bright Side, Killing Time, which is one of my all-time favorite hardcore records, and
Right.
I they dropped the Sick of It All album on that label, and then AF had dropped an album, and so he proposed to Howie Abrams, who was his A&R, who's, you know, shout out to Howie Abrams. He signed me twice. He loved it. He was like, "Well, let me hear that. Oh, that's crazy. Let's put it on In Effect." And so that's how it started. We dropped Ball of Destruction, and you know, it just was novelty. You know, it was like I wasn't out there touring. I was a little kid at the time. You know.
Yeah, was that part of the novelty? Like, look at this young ass kid in this band.
Yep. Yep. You know, and again, like I can't take credit for any of that. Like, if my brother had that, I don't even know if he had that vision. You know, I think maybe he was just trying to give me an outlet, or he just thought it was a cool idea or whatever. I don't know how far he was thinking with it, but yeah, you know, it just kind of happened organically, and you know, it definitely became an outlet for me, and even more. And then I kind of stepped away from that because I was just a kid, being a kid, you know, and I wasn't, you know, I went back to Florida and I was just living my life, and then I decided I wanted to move to New York permanently because that's just, it was calling me, you know, it always was from when I was a kid. So at 16, I jumped on a bus. It's like a Cuban Greyhound called La Cubana. You know, you catch it in Miami and then drops you off in Union City, New Jersey, which is like the second biggest Cuban population in the United States. First is Miami and second is Union City. So it's like, that's the route. Grabbed my bag, jumped on the La Cubana, 16 years old. And I basically told my family, I'm going with your blessing or not. I'm out of here. And I was getting into all kinds of trouble. You know, like I said, I was a kid. I was very rambunctious and rebellious and had a lot going on. So, yeah, that was what I wanted to do. And then my brother was like, well, if you're going to come up, you know, you stay with me and we'll figure it out. And he was living in a squad at the time. So he picked me up in his truck, you know, went to 10th Street between B and C. And that was what started that second chapter, you know. So, you know, fast forward to I'm 16 now, and I'm trying to figure myself out, trying to find out what I'm going to do, you know, why I'm here. I know I want to be here, but why am I here? I don't know. You know, I'm working a little, I'm doing a little this, a little that, you know, and my brother and Matt Henderson and all these different guys at the time were like, we should maybe do another Madball thing since you're here now. And so that's when we recorded Dropping Many Suckers, which was the second EP. That was 92. And I would say that definitely sparked something. At that point, then I'm older now. Now it's like, hey, maybe let's do some shows. You know, we parlayed that into like, okay, well, let's try some weekend shows. And then that started to spread around in the underground a little bit, and people were feeling that. So it just grew and grew and grew from there, man.
It sounds like your resources were pretty low. Was it tough to like make shit happen in terms of like being able to have a practice space, being able to have instruments, all shit like that? Because that's one thing that I heard this theory a long time ago, and I've always kind of noticed it to be true, is that you'll have like an inner city area and there won't really be bands from there, but then you'll have like the surrounding suburbs, and that's a lot of times where you'll see the bands who come to define the city coming from, because realistically, like, practicing as a band and shit is going to be fucking impossible in most urban areas, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or just expensive.
Expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one perk we had from the connection with AF is that they were already dialed in as a band. I mean, they were already OGs, you know, by this point. You know, they were actually about to, you know, bow out, and we were kind of fresh coming into it. And so when I first started Madball, I basically inherited that whole lineup. You know, the younger guys that were in Agnostic Front at the time came over to Madball. Will Shepler, Matt Henderson. And then we needed a bass player. So my brother was like the original bass player for Madball, but he never thought of, you know, that he'd be the permanent guy. So that's when we found Hoya. Because Hoya was my homie. We met through mutual friends, and we met in the scene. When I moved to New York, we met through, you know, my man Isaac, my man Toby. Like we all started becoming, shout out to E.
I'm slowly filling in all the different people who were involved in the scene at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, my man Toby.
Shout out Toby.
Shout out to Toby, my brother. he introduced me to Ezak, and Ezak introduced me to Hoya and my man Narc and our whole crew, and that was that introduction. And that kind of happened separate from music. Like, I didn't meet them because of Madball, really. I met them because I was in the city, and, you know, we are from the same scene.
Right.
But that was an organic friendship that just happened, like, you know, through friends, and then mutual friends. And, but yeah, when we started doing the band, my brother was kind of like done with music, and we needed a bass player, and Hoya played bass, but Hoya played a bass for a band called Demise. Demise was about to call it quits.
So you really were kind of in the right place at the right time in terms of being able to make something out of all these things that were sort of falling apart, huh?
Yeah, we were like, hey, hey, you're my man. You play bass, and we were like, all right, I'll play. Jumped in Madball, and, you know, he was with us, you know, from like 93 on.
Let me explain this to you from the perspective of somebody who grew up going to shows in Boston, is that, you know, we had our bands and our affiliations that even if you're not a part of it, you're sort of observing it.
Sure.
And there's kind of like a New York-Boston rivalry that, you know, even as just a fan, and I feel like a lot of this stuff was probably kept away from the public eye, but you always felt like there was a rivalry or there was beef at times. And we would look at Madball, and I was telling Danny the same thing. We would look at like a few of the different bands out there, like, these dudes are fucking tough. These guys are crazy. Like, these dudes fuck people up. Were you guys from the early days, was fighting like a pretty consistent thing in your world there?
The thing about us is, like, you know, what you see is what you get. Like, we didn't change, like, how we were, like, running around the streets as friends or whatever is like what we were on, you know what I'm saying? So, because when that whole tough guy, like, label came around,
right,
I was kind of like put off by that. You know, I was like, oh, that shit sounds corny, man. Like, tough guy. What do you mean tough guy? Like, being myself is being a tough guy? Like, it was, but I get it where it comes from, but like.
Tough guy hardcore. A lot of people probably don't remember that being a term.
So corny, bro.
I remember using that around like people that I knew who were more like regular like hip hop fan type kids, and they'd be like, "What? Like, why are you calling him a tough guy as an insult? Like, he's not tough."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "No, tough guy's kind of like almost a diss."
Yeah. I never liked that. I mean, we're a hardcore band. That's it. You know, you want to get real specific, New York hardcore band, but like.
But you guys were boastful about the fact that you would beat the shit out of somebody in your songs to a certain extent that probably.
Yeah. There was a little of that.
Because there's always been hardcore bands that are just more vague with their lyrics, so that like they might really be basically saying how tough they are, but it doesn't sound specifically like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to be fair, yeah, there were moments where we kind of would tell you, yeah, we'll punch you in the face if it gets out of hand.
New York scene was more braggadocious. It was more hip hop influenced, so it was more like I'll say something positive about me and my crew, whereas that maybe didn't make as much sense to some other scenes.
Right. And it was also a unique place. Like, there wasn't a lot of that crew stuff going on, really, you know. But we, like I said, we were like, because I'm not really like the bragging type or like posturing type. Like, none of us are.
Right.
I mean, we'll get it in, you know. Were we scrappy? Yeah. I mean, we were running around in the streets. We were, you know, we were doing our thing. You know?
Even if you weren't 100% like that, the image that you guys gave,
were, but we weren't trying to portray that.
But the vibe that you guys gave off, and like some of the earlier videos where you've got a fucking wife beater, you got Hoya next to you, he looks like he could do anything at any minute. I mean, you're just like kind of you sort of like embody the stereotype in that shit. I know you're not Italian, I guess, but it looks like you're like a young Italian fucking stickball playing ass kid. That, you know, like it's just, it certainly gives off a vibe.
Yeah, no, it was a vibe. But that's the funny thing about that is exactly what I was saying before. It's like how we were dressed in that video is like how we dressed every day. That was like a summertime, you know, we were like, you know, wife beater and like Dickies. We're like, that was what we were. You know, we didn't like, let's get dressed up for the video. We were like, we did it guerrilla style. Like, you know, Drew Stone was like, hey, I got some extra, you know, film from like this Biohazard video that they didn't use all the film or something, so I'll make you a video real quick. And we were in like Little Italy in Vinny Stigma's apartment, which was one of our headquarters, and we're like, let's go down to the alley and film a video. Gorilla, dressed how we dress every day, But yeah,
Back when that wasn't ordinary, because now you see
no.
rap videos all the time that are basically just them wearing what they would normally wear in a fucking alley. It looks hard. It looks real.
Yeah.
It's just the standard now. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys were drill rappers, really.
Basically, we invented it.
Yeah.
But it was what we were being genuine, and then some people took it and were like, oh, like we were posturing. But if you knew us in those days, like we were never dickheads. Like we were never disrespectful to people. You know what I'm saying? It was like if you came up to us with respect, we were always cordial, respectful people. It was like if you came, started talking shit to somebody's face, there may be repercussions for that. But like it was never like we walked into a room and we're like, it was not like none of us, not even our crew wasn't like that.
Right.
But you mess with one of us, cross the line, hey, you enter the danger zone and things happen.
Right.
But it was never like we were trying to have this image. We were just telling stories about how we were living at that time.
Right, because as you get older, a lot of the violence starts to seem a little bit more unnecessary, and you just look at it in a different light. But when you're that young, it's like this is just pure survival mode shit, where you're just trying to make it through the day, so you might need to present yourself in a certain way or react to people in a certain way.
That's the truth. I mean, and when we're kids in the early 90s, mid 90s, running around in New York, and maybe it wasn't the wildest era of New York, but it was still kind of wild.
Oh, those 80s and like early 90s. I mean, people, that's the stuff of legend,
Yeah. And so you had to, like you said, you had to have thick skin. You had to be a little tough. And we were holding down our little area. So we had to like make sure that people knew what time it was. But yeah, it was a fun time, man. It was a lot of fun, a lot of great moments, but there was violence for sure.
Right.
There was violence for sure.
So you just kept going with it. Like, define the eras that we could go through there, because like the band gets serious and everything, and then like how long are you going for? Are there breaks in here where you kind of take a little bit of time away from it?
Late 80s to early 90s, definitely there was that break. And then when we dropped Dropping Many Suckers, it was a brief break, but then we dropped Set It Off, which was our first full-length album. And that was on Roadrunner Records, and that was 94.
And so was that a big decision to sign with Roadrunner? Because they didn't have that many hardcore bands at the time. They were mostly metal, right?
Yeah, we were like maybe the only hardcore band.
Wow.
I mean,
and they were
traditional,
huge.
and I wouldn't even call us traditional hardcore. I mean, because, I look at the, generation before us as more traditional. Like we were doing something different. Like we were infusing, I don't know, our own flavor, our own vibes. But I guess now it might be looked, by the new generation as traditional.
When you know about all the generations of music, it becomes very hard. And that's why it's hard for me when like, a metal song comes on and somebody's like, oh yeah, this is a Screamo song. But they're like a fucking pop star or some shit. And I'm just like, fuck, that is so embarrassing that you're that unfamiliar with what Screamo means, even though that's so not a genre that's important to me, but you just sound crazy when you like misidentify the genre.
Absolutely, man. And that happens, all the time with everything, it's like it's crazy what people interpret, to be hardcore or this or that. And I'm not like I'm not the police for hardcore, but I do feel protective of it somewhat, but
you got to be a gatekeeper at some point, right?
A little bit, I don't want to be that older dude that's like trying to. I'm not like I'm open to. I like the new band, I like that there's new bands. I like that it's evolving, and I love all that. That's what we were. When we came in, we were the new band doing like something different. We were dressed like hip hop kids and like singing, and had a little bit more groove than some of the other stuff, and like we were introducing something new to it. So that's a good thing, when things evolve, but still with you do it in good taste, And but yeah, like we were, I guess, one of the few actual real hardcore bands, I guess you could say, on Roadrunner.
Okay.
Yeah,
and so when you signed to them though, are they telling you like, yo, we're gonna make you guys big? Because does that seem like a possibility that you guys could really become like a bigger hardcore band and do things that other bands haven't done before?
I mean, one thing hardcore will give you right from jump is humility. Because you're coming from, like, you're not trying to blow up. If you're doing this kind of music, it's because you love it. you're passionate. It's an outlet. It's therapeutic, you know, but like blowing up is like not something you're thinking about. But when we signed to Roadrunner, I did see that there were more possibilities for us to grow. You know, as big as maybe, you know, you can grow being a hardcore band.
But a lot of bands took this chance around this time, you know, where it was like, this is a very well-established pattern where you'd have like a indie band like Jawbreaker, who it's like at some point they sign to a major and there's a huge revolt by the fans and they like don't understand why the music has changed. And you know, and then you look back on it and it's like, fuck, that was a classic record that they put out that they basically got canceled for.
Yeah, that's whack.
And I mean, you can just basically take that exact timeline and map that over to like Cave In, who I was a big fan of at one point in Boston, and like a million other fucking bands.
Yeah, no, it's for us, we were fortunate to be like, we were fresh, we were a new thing. So it's like, how could we disappoint anyone? Like people barely know about us. I mean, yeah, people know about us, like the real underground knows about us. You know, by that point we'd been doing weekends. We did maybe one tour in Europe with AF. And that was like, we were being introduced, you know, to the scene, but it's such a small scene. It's still growing and it's going through this like the 80s part of it kind of like faded out. Now it's going through like this resurgence. There's like a new wave coming. So we became part of that new wave. So I don't think like people looked at it like, oh, they're signing to Blase Blah. And plus, Roadrunner was technically independent, even though they were heavyweight in the independent world. So there was never that kind of vibe. But I know what you're saying. I mean, because our releases before that were like, you know, little EPs, and it's like, oh, what are these guys doing? But honestly, we didn't even, when we were doing the band and doing, you know, little weekends and doing the EPs and doing all that stuff, we were doing it for fun, but we weren't taking it super serious. We were like, let's see what happens with this. But it's fun. It's an outlet.
Right.
We love doing it. We feel good doing it, but we're not like, and then
that album did kind of change everything, right?
It did.
Yeah.
It did. Big time. And again, back to Howie Abrams, the same guy that like put us on with Ball of Destruction, he was working at Roadrunner. And he heard that we were out and about playing and came to a show and was like, wow, okay. And approached us and said, hey, you guys serious about this? Because I'm with Roadrunner. You want to, you know, have a discussion and maybe we'll do a record? And I was like, and we all were like, all right, why not? And that's how Set It Off came to be. So Howie, again, shout out to Howie, because he saw, you know, he saw something in us too. And yeah, man, we talked to him and we were like, yeah, we signed some crazy old school whack deal, but it was great because it was a springboard to like, you know, a lot of things, man.
Did you have a lawyer at the time? Anybody actually look at the deal?
We didn't have, unfortunately, I didn't use my man Dave Stein. Dave Stein's my lawyer for years, but no, we had like Will Shepler's like cousin who was like an architect or something, like, or like he was like a you know what I'm saying? He was like a lawyer for like, I don't know, he did like a different kind of law, and like it was whack.
You were resentful at all about the deal you signed?
You know, as I got older and I became more knowledgeable, more savvy about the business side of things, I was like, damn, I wish we would have been a little smarter about that. But
it's kind of a rite of passage for young artists during that era.
A lot of people did that, man. And people did worse. People signed worse deals of, you know, so it was what it was, you know. We signed, you know, a bunch of records and you know, gave away a lot of ownership, you know, and that's like stuff now at this age and at this stage in the game that I'm like cautious about, you know, ownership. And like, you know, I do, you know, when we release stuff now, it's like licensing, you know, it's not like you don't own my shit. I'll license it to you.
Yeah. The labels are in a totally different position at this point, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But back then it was like everyone, like you said, rite of passage. Everyone was doing that. They weren't, and we weren't that serious about it. So we were like, hey, somebody know a lawyer? Yeah. And Will was like, yeah, I know a lawyer. He does like real estate law. Okay. Check this out. Boom, we sign it, you know.
So what does that actually change, though, putting that record out and getting way bigger and stuff? Are you just doing way bigger tours? Does the fan base get significantly bigger? Like, how did your life change?
Well, Roadrunner is a European-based label.
Right.
So going back to Europe, you know, they were based there, but they had their offices in New York, whatever. But like heavy music in Europe was starting to pop off. So we got bunched in with a lot of those releases. I mean, some classic releases came out around that time. And we were grouped in with that. And simultaneously, we jumped on like a festival. And I think it was obviously to do with the fact that we were affiliated with Roadrunner and dropping a record with them.
Right.
That opened people's eyes to like, hey, maybe, they're on Roadrunner, let's give these guys a shot. So
Yeah, I
we
mean,
did a couple festivals.
It's kind of like the real or like the regular overall music world in the sense that like signing with a label at that time really could just open doors for you that would just, even if you maybe are not big or you're only so big, it will just make you look way bigger / expose you to way more people, and just these labels could just open those doors for you. And that's like you give up a big chunk of your ownership and you get to take on all these opportunities that grow your shit like crazy.
Yeah, no,
right?
that's correct, man. That's 100%. I mean, it was on a smaller scale. It wasn't like they got us on the radio and like now we're like a top 40. You know what I'm saying? It was on a different level, but same concept, same idea.
Yeah.
You know, like us being grouped in with like these other heavy music bands, which were like different, like Sepultura, Machine Head, I think, was putting out a record, like maybe Life Agony, like all these different, they all had a different vibe, but it was all heavy music. And then here come us with our brand of hardcore. And so I think that signing to Roadrunner definitely, I know it definitely did something big for us.
Right.
And like I said, it opened up the doors to a few festivals, and then that exposure opened up the doors to other festivals. And I mean, we didn't blow up in the sense of, I don't know what you would call blowing up, you know what I'm saying? But
right.
like we started to get more exposure, you know, and then we started to tour more. So that gave us even more exposure. And
I feel like there was this era in the late 90s where if somebody in Blink-182 wore your shirt, that your band would just get like 10 times bigger the week later.
Could be.
Did you guys have that effect? Did Travis rock it or something?
Nah, man, they never rocked our shirt.
Really?
Nah, I don't think any of those kind of bigger punk bands ever. Well, you know, I shouldn't say that.
Because you were lucky you guys had one of the sickest logos. So you could not even like the band and still rock the shirt just because of the logo.
Thank you.
At least from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if I could think of a band that was like bigger, that would have rocked our stuff, it would have been Rancid, maybe. Rancid are my homies, and I know they love New York hardcore.
Yeah.
Like, and at one point, and they still are relevant and a big band, really. I mean, they can still go somewhere and few thousand people in any given night, anywhere. So that to me is success. They're doing their thing, but at one point they were really big.
Yeah.
And they might have rocked it somewhere, but no, there was no Blink-182 cats rocking any of our stuff. I don't think so. Not back then.
That was one thing I realized in talking to Toby, is that H2O had like a whole wave of popularity basically just from some T-shirt placements, because that was such a big deal at the time.
Oh yeah, and you know, they were a little more accessible too, you know, because they were more melodic.
Yeah.
So they can cater a little more. And I consider them a hardcore band through and through, but just melodic hardcore band.
Right.
I love H2O,
Yeah.
and not just because Toby's my man. It's they have good music, man.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
good band.
Great band,
yeah, great live performing, great all of it. But
was there ever pressure on you guys to make songs that might be a little bit more accessible?
nah, we were just like, we're gonna be us, you know. We never approach it that way. I mean, maybe later records we were like more, you know, we're thinking like what would go off at like a festival, or like chorus wise, what would hit a certain way, but like we still were like not trying to write, like, you know what I'm saying? It was like, I mean, we got better about structure and certain things because just from being in the game and learning about, you know, how to write and all that stuff, but yeah, we never approached it like in that way, because it's, again, we come from the school of like, we're not looking at it like we're gonna blow up from this single. We want to put out a good album through and through, and then just do what we do, and hopefully, you know, that core fan base stays there, and then they tell their friends and their friends about it, and like we keep growing in that way.
Right.
You know, we're not relying on like a single per se. I mean, the closest thing I think we came to that was like dropping Doc Martin Stomp on one of our records. We did a song called Doc Martin Stomp, and it has a very catchy, you know, chorus and
Right.
like. But again, that wasn't like let's do this song. That, you know, that was just like an organic thing. That's how we did it, you know. But yeah.
Definitely. So, have you just been going nonstop for like 20 years, or has there been breaks in this? Because I imagine that there's got to be big breaks at times, right?
Yeah, there were breaks, man. There were breaks in around 2000. We had a break for like almost 2 years, and we had just dropped our album "Hold It Down," which I think is an overlooked record of ours. Personally, one of my prouder moments of records that I've dropped.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, you know, now are like acknowledge that record, but like we had just done "Hold It Down," and I got into a little bit of legal trouble, and we had some band members that were not fully committed, and there was a lot of turmoil and like weird stuff happening in the band. So like we sort of just backed off.
It's got to be tough because I always just think about that. It's hard to be in a relationship with a girl or whatever. It's like the idea of 4 or 5 dudes being able to stay on the same schedule to be able to make the same 3-week tour happen without necessarily having a job or something that they got to do, whatever. Like that just sounds fucking logistically damn near impossible unless the dudes are so motivated and focused on the band that they're willing to sacrifice fucking everything in order to pursue it. And it seems like to keep that going for a long period of time is like the most amazing thing in the world to me.
Yeah, you got to be fully committed. And like we had lost 2 of our guys that for that reason is like they were doing this for even longer than us. You know, Will, Matt, those are my brothers forever. But like the original Madball lineup, like those guys had to move on. Like they were like getting older, and they were like, I don't know if I could do this hardcore thing for like the next whatever many years.
Especially when you have a family.
Yeah, you know, my man Matt got married. You know, Will wanted to go back to school maybe because he's seeing that this is not that lucrative of a life.
Yeah, because, okay, obviously you don't got to say specifics, but from a financial perspective, when you go on tour for a month, is this like a decent way for you to make money to support your family, or is this kind of just like you're doing it because you love it and realistically it doesn't make any sense for you financially?
It became that. It didn't start out that way, but it became that, and it had to become that.
Become a sustainable thing?
A sustainable thing.
Right.
It had to become a sustainable thing, but in the earlier days, it was just like we were doing it because we loved it.
Right.
It was an outlet. I mean, we were getting to go to Europe, getting to travel. It was like, that stuff's like priceless, you know? And so if we made money, cool. If we didn't make so much, whatever, we go home, we'll get a job, we'll hustle something, you know, we'll make it happen.
Right.
That was the mentality when you're, you know, that's the mentality when you're young, and you can afford to have that mentality when you're young.
Yeah.
But fast forward to when you're older and you get married and you have a kid, then you have another kid.
Yeah.
No more of that. No, there's no playing around anymore. Like it's got to become viable. And at some point it did become, you know, I wouldn't say like, it's still a modest living.
Right.
But it became, well, okay, I can do this tour, pay my bills, take care of my fam, then, you know, go back, do my family thing.
It's not like you're just doing 3 weeks of charity.
No, hell no.
Yeah, because that would be tough to keep going.
Yeah, no, I would. Yeah,
you know, Incendiary from Long Island?
I do.
So my boy Brendan, I used to be roommates with him. I live in New York. So
Okay.
they were like the only hardcore band during that era of my life that I ever hung out with. I hung out with those guys a shitload.
Yeah, they're a good band, man.
Amazing, yeah. And I always have that conversation with him of like, you know, because he's in the position of his band just gradually gaining popularity over like 10, 12 years, however long it's been.
Yep.
And now they're in the position of getting offered tours and festivals overseas and everything like that. But then meanwhile, he's in the position of like, he has a really good job, you know? And like, it's like for him to like go off on tour and take a month off from work is like, he's basically be paying a huge amount of money to do that. So it's like it becomes this weird thing where hardcore is weird. Your band kind of gets more popular over time, which is pretty much the opposite of rap.
Oh yeah.
And then you keep getting more of these opportunities, but then real life, the pressure of real life keeps becoming more pressing too.
That's an unfortunate situation to be in, and I know a lot of people that were in that same position. And it's like we had the luxury that we were like, we were just a bunch of derelicts, so we weren't like in college or like had like these great jobs. And I mean, to be fair, we were also young kids. We're teenagers still, so we're like running around being wild. We were a different, we were from a different ilk, but we didn't have to make that choice because we were like. I mean, I had jobs.
Right.
Then I'd be like, you want to go to Europe or you want to stay and like shovel that, pile of dirt right there?
Right.
I'm going to Europe.
Yeah.
No,
you kind of have to
no-brainer.
hope that nobody else in the band has like this crazy stroke of luck. Because realistically, if one of them hits the lottery, they might not be going on the next tour.
Yeah. Fuck you and your van.
But if you hit the lottery, you're still going on tour, right?
You know what? I would.
Right.
I don't think I would do it. To the extent that I do it now, like I would probably be way more selective about it.
Right.
If I had like
$1 million pops up in your bank account tomorrow. Yeah.
I'm not, and I'm not going to be, but I still need the outlet.
Right.
Yeah, I still, I'm, this is part of who I am.
Right.
So I would still want to have that outlet, and I'm sure, and I think people would still want to hear from our band. I would hope. So yeah, I would do it, but I would just be like super selective about it if I had like financial comfort.
Yeah.
But I'm not in that position, man. For me, this is like I got to work to eat.
Yeah.
Feed my family.
Definitely. But is there a drain associated with it when you're playing? I don't know what your like primary markets are, but like I'm sure there's American cities that you've played 100 times in your life, and is it ever? I don't know. Sometimes when I've been on the road for a long period of time and you're just kind of hitting these cities over and over, it just feels kind of weird. Like, man, to most people, traveling is so exciting, and to me, this has just become unbelievably routine. Yeah,
it can be. It can be, and it can be, and especially being a hardcore band, man, because it's very hit or miss. Especially in the States. Europe is more consistency.
Because you're such a rarity when you do pop up there. Yeah. Yeah,
and I mean, by now we've planted our flag there. Like that like almost became like a second home for us. But even still, like it's consistent. Like you can play in the middle of nowhere, and the club will be packed.
Right.
That's not the case in the States. You can have one night where you play a packed club. You can have the next night where you're in the middle of wherever and you're playing so that part kind of can wear on you as you get older.
Right.
Because when you're a kid, you're like, whatever. There were 10 people here tonight. So what? I'm just, I'm young. It'll be a better show tomorrow. Wherever we land tomorrow.
Right.
As you get older and you've been doing this now, 20, 30 years, you're like, man, I'm coming all the way out here to play to like this many people. Like
it's got to kind of hurt when that happens.
I'm like, man, just call me when the festivals, want us. What I mean? It's like you get those kind of moments where you're just like, what am I doing? But you have so much invested in this.
Right.
Like, so many years. It's like it's not something I could just walk away from. It's like I don't have like a bunch of other revenue streams. I got other things that I do. I got a production company. I got other little things that I merch thing that I do. But like, Madball's still the main source. So it's like I can't just like drop it. And I don't want to just stop doing it because I do enjoy the feeling I get from doing it.
Right.
But yeah, it can get hard sometimes out there, in some of these areas, some of these pockets.
Really? So like if you guys do an American tour, how long is it going to last and how many markets would you hit?
I mean, we've been like weekend warriors lately.
Okay.
Just because coming back from all the craziness that was going on.
Right.
We've just been doing like, I don't know, maybe like a week max, but we've been hitting a lot of areas, East Coast over here, Texas run, Cali run like we're doing now, just all Cali, 5-6 shows, so like, and that's great because I can get back to my family. You know, I do it like that. I get back home. Everybody goes back home to their fam. And
How old are your kids at this point?
my son's 11. My daughter's 6.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a time that you want to miss out on too much of it if you don't have to.
No, I don't. And that's, you know, that changed how we operate too. You know, when we started, you know, having families and all that, like that changed kind of like the length of the tours and like just, we did become more selective, but you can only be so selective, you know, if you need to make money.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I try to balance it, man, because I can take month-long tours. I get offered, you know, a month over here, 2 months over there. I'm not doing that.
Really?
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Unless it's like an extremely, you know, great opportunity that like will give our band more like visibility and like pay well, then I'd have to consider it.
Are your kids like very sad when you got to leave?
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough.
Yep. It sucks. Basically, when we, you know, started our family, it got harder and harder to leave. Yeah.
Honestly,
And even for my wife, when me and my wife first got together, just leaving her was a bummer. You know,
imagine they had never invented FaceTime.
right?
Well, now they have Zoom and all these other things.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like that is one thing when I'm on FaceTime with my kid and my girl for a half hour when we're apart, it's like this is a situation where technology has made my life clearly better because it might not have been the same as being in the same room as them, but it might have been 30% as good. It was definitely the emotional connection with my kid and my girl that I needed in this moment, you know?
Yeah, you need to look at their eyes and like, for sure.
When you get
man.
that good connection, and
Yeah.
you're both on good Wi-Fi,
Yep,
it's,
yep.
and it's
Oh,
the
yeah.
fucking worst when you're not and it's just cutting out.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the fact that we have that, you know, technology now that I have kids, you know? Yeah, but it's still not the same as being with them and like hanging with them and doing all the stuff you do with them. But, you know, we make it work, man. I brought them to Europe, you know, my daughter was in Europe when she was like a year and a half.
Right.
And my son was, you know, a little baby too, but like, you know, it was fun, but it was hard. I think now if I do that again, it'll be a lot better, a lot easier because they're older and they're like, you know, like they're 11 and 6, you know, and they're chilling. You know?
bring them to the shows and stuff. Do they see what you do?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've done some state stuff with me,
Right.
like longer tours.
Because Toby's all about that. He's got his kid fully in it.
Well, Max plays in H2O, so
Crazy,
like, he's in there.
He's fully indoctrinated them into this shit.
Yeah, fully. Shout out to Max, my little nephew, man.
Super sick. Yeah.
Good kid, man. Good kid. And good drummer, man. He's killing it.
Right.
But yeah, that was just sort of like Moon always did like merch for H2O, like his wife. So like that with them, it was always kind of built in. You know, for me, I don't bring my family on every little thing I do because honestly, I can't afford it.
Right.
But if it's like a longer thing, you know, I try to budget it out and like, hey, if I can afford to bring them, I'll do it. That just makes it easier on them. I mean, and honestly on me, man, it's like kind of selfish too because then like I don't have to worry about them. I know
Right.
they're like at the hotel or they're wherever, you know, like they're nearby.
Right.
So that's the ideal thing, you know, but, you know, we're not in the position where we can always afford that. That's just like,
At this point in your career, I'm sure you slept on a lot of floors early in the career, but at this point, do you require a bed or are you still down to post up on the floor at somebody's?
hell no.
No.
I'm on a bed, man. Yeah, I don't do the fly. You know what? Even back in the days, we did that like briefly.
Oh,
here
really?
and there.
It wasn't usually like that?
We were like, nah, man, we're going to a hotel.
Right.
Like we early on, we're not sleeping on some guy's floor. I mean, we did do it.
Yeah.
We did do it, and it was also the weird thing of like, I don't want to stay at somebody I don't know's house. You know, like if it was like a friend, you know, like okay, you know what I'm saying? Like let's go crash at so and so's house. He's, you know, my friend, so and so's friend. He's a friend of a friend, whatever it is. But like staying at a complete stranger's house was always like a weird
Right.
thing for me.
But okay,
But we did it.
early in your career, I feel like tour is all chaos.
Yeah.
And then later in your career, I'm guessing it's like mostly controlled energy. That you're just not getting into crazy situations, that if you got into a fight or a fucking weird situation with the cops or whatever, that it would be such an outlier. Is that accurate? Like that it was just pure craziness back in the day, and now it's pretty tame.
That's accurate to us for sure. I mean, in our wilder days, yeah, there were some crazy things that went on tour. You know, because you got, we're like, these kind of maniacs. And thankfully we have this outlet which probably saved our lives on many occasions, took us out of the city,
right,
brought us to Europe or wherever. Mm-hmm. It was a life-saving thing, man. It really was.
Showing you how much bigger the world is,
showing us
that it's not your neighborhood.
Yeah, and also, you learn about other cultures, everything.
Just what's possible.
Everything about it. And it took us out of a certain element, because we were living in an element of like danger and like putting ourselves in this beef, that beef, graffiti beef, this thing, that, all kinds of things, So it really did save us. And I know that's like a cliche thing, and in hip hop especially, but it really, that's a reality for us. It was something that was really positive, but to the point you were saying before, it was like, we still manage to get in trouble on tour sometimes.
Right.
Like some wild shit happened every now and again. People would step to us trying to test us. Like, oh, you're New York tough. Oh yeah.
Right.
You don't look that tough. You're a skinny, lanky, skinny little guy. Pimples on your face. Like,
what's the craziest fight story you're willing to share with us from the history of Madball right here?
Man, there's a lot. And I don't like to condone it, glorify it, justify it.
Right.
Not just because I have kids and I don't want them to. Of course, for that reason. But also just because it goes back to that whole thing where like now they think now it's like the tough guy thing. I'm posturing. It ain't about that.
Right.
There's some I can't share.
Bring up some bad memories for people.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't like when people fight at our shows.
Right.
Like, I don't get off on that.
Yeah.
I think people sometimes would do that almost to like, they're
it's
trying
like
to impress
homage,
us.
yeah.
Like, hey, let's get into a fight during Madball. Like,
I was that guy in Milwaukee who punched the girl in her face and broke her glasses.
Yeah, like, you're not cool, man.
Right.
I don't like that. Or like, I don't like the fact that you're interrupting our live set right now.
And as an adult, I think about all the fights that happened at shows that I thought were so sick. And I'm like, all that was ruining the chance that venue's ever going to let a hardcore show happen there again. Probably in a lot of cases cost the promoter money. In a lot of cases, bands didn't get to play. Bands didn't get to get paid. All kinds of bad things probably came from these fights that I was so excited about when I was a kid. And it seems so stupid and immature. If I was the person, like if I put on an event and somebody I know starts a fight at that fucking event, oh, you got hell to pay. We're having a conversation.
That's my life now, because I do a show. Black and Blue Productions is my production company.
Oh, okay, that's you. Wow, all right.
Yeah, well,
I didn't realize that.
It's me and my partner, cousin Joe, and we do the Black and Blue Bowl, which we were trying to bring back that tradition of the Super Bowl of hardcore, because it had gone away for a while from New York, and so we were trying to bring that back, and then it kind of sparked the thing. Now you got festivals popping up left and right. But when we did that, that wasn't happening really around in America, at least. But anyway, the homies know.
Right.
We don't shit where we eat.
Yeah.
Like, this is our event.
You be the one stopping a fight.
Yeah.
Not the one starting
you
one,
better
right?
stop a fight.
Right.
Your security. We got like, there might be like some security for the club, but we got like real security. We got like an army in here that they better be about, calming things down, not creating issues,
Right.
And which is funny, because it's like 180, it's like we used to be getting into shit, but like now we're the ones stopping shit,
right?
And and creating a safe environment,
right,
if you will, for like other people that just want to come to a show and have fun.
Right, because as an older person, you're looking at a 18-year-old kid who this is his first hardcore show, and you're thinking about if this was your kid, down the road a little bit, and wanting them to have a good experience, and all of a sudden you can't think that it's funny when they get fucking kicked in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some percentage chance that that's just going to happen, and that's just a lesson you got to learn about not standing where you were standing, but
Don't be on the tracks when the train's coming through.
Yeah.
Hardcore, you got to know that too. I mean, you're not going to always, you might get punched in the face. The guy wasn't intending to hurt you. It's just, there's a lot of activity in there.
My girl's a
There's lot of
normie,
aggressiveness.
and my girl's a normie, and I brought her to an incendiary show, and it was like she just witnessed like a riot. Like she really didn't understand.
Did she hate it or was?
I wouldn't say she hated it. She's happy that she was on stage, so she didn't really have to deal with the harsh reality of it. But
Definitely a good place to watch it from.
Definitely. So on tour as a grown-ass man, what are the most important things that you have to keep in check in order for you to feel good or have a good experience while you're on tour?
I have to try to eat at least one good meal. You know, when we were younger, it was like eat whatever garbage, fast food, and just go drink, you know, get buzzed, play the show, whatever, you know, it was like, but as a grown man, and I've been a grown man for a while now, it's more about like, let me, you know, get to where I got to go, get a good meal in, and then there's that window of time I got to digest. Because when I go up there, I ain't gonna be sitting on a chair.
You're way more.
I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna try to give it my all when I get on stage.
And you're more conscious of what's gonna get you into the state of mind to be able to give your all.
Exactly.
Your whole day is kind of based around being able to have this massive burst of energy at 8 p.m. or whatever.
Yep, that's a fact, man. You know, have our, you know, the first things first with the coffee, nice little coffee in the morning, then breakfast, and then maybe if I can get one more, you know, good meal in before the show. And this might sound boring to some people, but that's the reality, man. When you get, you know, it's like, I'm here to, you know, this is, you know, I love doing this, but this is my job as well. You know, and as you get older, you treat it more that way. You know, when you're younger, you treat it as just like an experience. You know, you're just out there.
Right.
Whatever comes.
Let's live as hard as we can.
However you react to whatever it is how you react. It's like,
I used to think it was so cool to get like 2 hours sleep. Just stay up all night, wake up early, just do a bunch of crazy shit all day.
Now you need like what?
Yeah, well, now I just recognize that, if I get 8 hours, I am going to feel way better than if I get 5.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So I need to do that in order to take care of myself, you know?
And it's hard the way we do it because we don't take days off. Because we can't afford days off. So we hit it, you know, consecutive. And it's like sometimes you'll get out of a venue and even though you're done, you got to unwind. And then by the time you get to the hotel, you get checked in. It's like you're going to bed at 1, 2 in the morning. It's like you don't want to, but that's what it is. And it's like then sometimes if you have a long drive, you got to get up at 8, you know. So it's like the sleep thing could sometimes be rough on the road. But that's another important thing is to try to get a little bit of sleep, you know, try to just...
Whatever you
take
can
your
get,
vitamins, man. Just, you know, try to take care of yourself as best you can, you know.
And I've been on trips in recent memory where I was getting 2 hours sleep every night just because the schedule was so packed and we had to fly out every morning.
That sucks, man.
And it's terrible. I can have a good time, but it's like, am I the best version of myself? For sure, no.
For sure, no. Your brain's not working.
But I also like the feeling sometimes of knowing that I still got it in me to really just work my ass off on no sleep,
to grind it out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely know that feeling too.
But I think it's also just important to recognize when you're not at your best. Like, if I'm answering emails, a lot of times, if I'm answering emails at 10 p.m., it's like, I'll see one that's a big decision, and I'm like, no, I need 10 a.m. energy to think about this and make a good decision.
That's called grown folk stuff right there. That's like that's when you know you're like, you know, that's like responsible thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully.
Definitely.
That it finally arrived at some point in my life.
For sure. So what's important to you at this point in the career? How much longer do you see yourself doing this? Are you Mick Jagger? Are you going to be 70-year-old rocking out on stage? Or what do you want out of this life?
I mean, you know, I'll do it as long as it stays relevant. You know, I think I'm grateful that I feel like we're one of the older bands, I guess. I never thought of myself as an older band, you know, because like, I don't know, you know, there's a whole generation before us, but like, I guess now we're considered some, you know, like OGs. And I think we're one of the OGs that like, you know, we still have relevance. And I like to think like we still put out some, you know, respectable music. You know, the minute we can't do any of those things or put on a show at the level that we do it, then I would say it's a wrap for Madball. I mean, creatively, I think I'll always want to do something, I do like some hip hop stuff on the side. I got other projects that I've done, Hazen Street with Toby,
Yeah.
I will always want to create stuff, music, might not necessarily even be hardcore, but
Do you think that you could go on a tour and maybe just realize at some point that you're just over the touring, but still, like, it feels like these days, like, hard breakups are a lot less common, where like you would still be down to go do some festivals every year, because even if you're fucking over it, even if you got great things going on in your life, why wouldn't you want to get together with the boys a couple times a year and do some shows? It feels like there's less of a reason to do that hard breakup these days.
I agree. And I mean, we did have a hard breakup in 2000, but I think it was a blessing because we had to reset ourselves. But I don't see why we would have to do that again, like that. Like, just be like, that's it, we're done. You're never gonna see us play again, and then look like a fool when you come back 2 years later,
Yeah.
So it's like, there's no reason to do that. But
the second you like break up, the pressure kind of mounts. Where then if you go 4, 5, 10 years without playing, then like everybody would be really hyped to see you reunite. So it's kind of like, why even bother announcing it?
Right. Exactly. It's just
you're coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Fall back, and when then make the big show.
Yeah.
But I think we still have a lot of life in us. I think we're still putting out good music, and we're still performing, at a level where I think we the people are feeling it. And and as of now, I don't have like a crazy plan B backup plan financially just yet. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors, but even if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't drag this through the mud. Like, I wouldn't do it just to do it, to just pay the bills. That's part of it. We've invested a lot. So like, this has become my career, my job. So I do need to, do it to pay the bills, but that's not the only reason I would do it. And if it started to like seem like weird, like, like, hey man, you guys should, throw it in. Like I wouldn't be down with it. But we're not there, man. I don't feel like we're there at all. I mean, I feel like, we still got a lot of life in us. We still got a lot more music to offer. I mean, come see our show if we're in your town, and you judge for yourself about the show, So I don't know. I can't project. Like, I remember being asked this question like 10 years ago, and I remember being asked this question 20 years ago, and I couldn't answer it then.
Right.
I remember being asked this question many different, periods in my life.
Right.
Like, do you picture yourself doing it? And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know where this is going. Like, I don't, but I don't know how many more years we got, man. Could be 10, could be 20, I don't know.
That's dope. It's dope to hear that 10 is the low end.
Yeah.
That's sick.
I think this band's got that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's good to hear that, man, just because it's motivating to see somebody who just finds something that they love and just wants to and just feels so good. Like, does it ever feel like it's a comparison? I don't know what your history is with drugs, but does it ever feel like a drug addiction where you're just like chasing this high, and every time you get a great performance in, it's like you just hit it, like that was just one good dose, and it's a hard dose to get because you have to literally like go on tour and go play all these fucking shows. It's like, but you're just chasing that fucking feeling.
Well, I've never. That's a great analogy, but yeah, it could be. I mean, it could be for real, because like you want every show to be like that show that really clicks. You want that, So I guess you could view it that way, like you're chasing that. Every show you're chasing that, but sometimes you're like, you're in somewhere where that's not what's gonna pop off, But yeah, it could be viewed that way. I mean, I'm not a drug guy, but I did have my moments with coke.
Right.
I dabbled in it. I was probably the last of my friends to try it. I used to think people that did it were suckers.
Yeah.
Even if I was around it, I could help you find it if you need it.
Definitely.
But like, I know what it was, but I was like, I ain't fucking with that. I ain't doing that. And then at one point you try it, and I'm like, oh shit, I kind of like
it
this.
could definitely make a good guy do some suckerish things.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, it's terrible. But
Yeah.
you know, I dabbled in that. I mean, that's about the extent of like, yeah, I'm not, obviously smoke some weed here and there, but I'm not a weed guy.
Right.
Never was a big drug guy. You know, I remember guys doing angel dust and all this crazy, people experimenting. You know, people that love doing acid all the time. Like, I don't really like that state, like being in that mind state. You know,
I think
like,
they should bring the Angel Dust back because there was a lot of great rap albums made off Angel Dust.
Yeah, baby.
All that Wu-Tang shit.
I don't know, man. There's so much whack shit out there now with like, people dying from. So like, yeah, look. But yeah, I had my little stint with certain things, but
you couldn't get me to do a line of coke now. I'd be too scared. I'm like, there's all kinds of crazy shit out there.
Oh,
yeah, no.
I haven't touched that in like good 10 years.
Yeah.
And I never now it skeeves me out. Like I remember when I stopped messing with it and I'd see people doing it around me, I'd be like, I kind of miss that. I'm way past that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't miss none of that.
Yeah.
I don't miss the feeling, how I felt the next day or being up 2-3 days. I don't miss none of that. It's terrible. But I still get my drink on, and like, I try to keep it civilized, but
I've seen Danny declaring his sobriety on Twitter.
I saw that.
I hope that sticks. I'm proud of him.
I hope that sticks too, man.
I don't even know. I never seen him fucked up, I don't think, but
or if you did, you didn't know it.
That's what. Yeah.
But
asterisks.
He needs that. He needs that in his life right now. So yeah, let's hope it sticks, man. Definitely needs that.
That's dope, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man.
Real honor having a legend in here.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the
let me know next time you come out to LA. We should come out and vlog a show and shit.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah, that'd be legendary.
Absolutely. I'll give you a little more lead time, man. I'll give you a heads up.
Let me know.
Yeah.
It's a little last minute, but I'm hyped we got it in.
Yeah, man. Definitely.
Appreciate you, man. Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
Freddy Madball, legendary. Go turn them up on streaming services and whatnot. No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, Instagram, etc. I think I said Instagram twice. That's not good. Like, comment, and subscribe. NoJumper.com if you want to support. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
Hey,
that's tight.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, that was fun.